of the economy haven't kicked in to shape the way the government would have wanted when corporate taxes were brought down. How do you respond to this suggestion that the government, despite all the nudges, private and public, including some of the nudges from you, that you have you been able to get the private investment cycle going in the way that you would like? And if not, what's holding it back, and how soon do you see it kick into shape the way you would like?
Rahul, these are the naysayers who can hold that view. I mean, for some people, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. And that's the kind of approach that is reflected in this thinking. It is the government's job to provide adequate, sustainable, robust infrastructure on the back of which, of course, the economy gets the benefit of a multiplier impact. And as you are aware, infrastructure or capex investments give you almost a 3.5x multiplier benefit. But more importantly, across the world, you will observe that unless your goods and services are competitive, you cannot compete in international markets, and no country has become a developed nation without having adequate and strong domestic systems, both for logistics, for infrastructure, for adequate port infrastructure. And to my mind, Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharamanji has really hit the nail on the head by her actions over the last 4 years. Capex spending has grown from 3.5 lakh crores 4 years ago to 5.5, 7.5, and now 10 lakh crores. Effective capex is 13.5 lakh crores. Because today, even when we spend in a scheme like Manrega, we don't just dig a hole and fill it up. That was the kind of thinking governments in the past had. We try to create some infrastructure out of that. Mention was made of 75 Amrit Sarovars in each district. Now, this is a very visionary long-term thinking that we should have water reservoirs which will come to our rescue in the time of a calamity or a need. Similarly, the focus on tourism. We are all aware that tourism is the highest job generator per rupee invested. And private sector always invests when there is demand for goods and services. And infrastructure investment or capex creates that demand for goods and services. That demand then gives you consumption expenditure. Consumers then further fuel the demand for infrastructure, and that virtuous cycle propels the economy to higher levels of growth.
Let's spend a moment on exports. In the first 2 quarters of the last year, exports were doing smashingly well, and everybody said, okay, this is great news for India because merchandise exports are taking off in a big way. Then, because of all the global turmoil, in the third quarter, exports were flat. In the fourth quarter, it's being said that exports could actually be either flat or potentially even negative in terms of growth. What's your outlook for exports in the year going forward, given their importance to the India growth story and given all the global uncertainty? The fact that trade barriers are being created, there are trade tensions between China and the United States, everybody is trying to do a version of Atmanirbhar America, Atmanirbhar Europe, even if they don't say it like that. So where does that, how does that jeopardize or push back what you are trying to get done with export growth?
No, it doesn't push back anything we are doing. It only reinforces the urgency of all our actions. So this government has taken several actions to promote exports. For example, for the first time, our missions worldwide have got involved in our effort to expand trade. Trade, tourism and technology, for that matter, all three. For the first time with production-linked incentive schemes, we are trying to create capacities to global scale. For the first time ever, the bigger focus is on quality. And you might be aware we have almost doubled the quality control orders in the last 2.5 years. Going forward, we'll be expanding our focus on quality because we believe both consumers in India and internationally want to see high quality and competitively priced goods and services. And my own understanding is that quality never costs anything. Quality is the cheapest thing going. It actually helps you to save wastage and losses and reduce your cost. So we are doing a kind of holistic planning to prepare the nation to become a large player in the international markets. Last year, exports of goods and services combined were about $674 billion. This year, we'll see a double-digit growth. Again, when we look at goods and services combined, certainly services growing faster, merchandise will grow slower, but still grow. And despite all this international turmoil, despite inflation having reduced consumption demand, despite heavy stocking in many countries which is not getting consumed, India's exports continue to grow, albeit modestly in merchandise and on the fast lane in services. Overall, we'll do a double-digit growth this year also. For the next year, we are also working on, we have already concluded 2 free trade agreements. UAE and Australia, they will start giving us results. Australia has just come into force 1 month ago. We are looking at more free trade agreements with developed countries, the G7 countries, and going forward, as we improve our capacity to offer goods and services, as we improve our quality, become more competitive, and have greater trading arrangements so that we have duty-free access, which some of our neighboring countries or countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh have through being an LDC or because of their free trade agreements. That competitive edge, where they have an edge over us, we'll be able to nullify. And I do believe that going forward, our target for 2030 is $2 trillion of exports, 1 trillion of merchandise, 1 trillion of services.
Okay, I have one more question for Minister Goyal, but I also want to introduce Anish Shah, who heads the Mahindra Group as its Managing Director and Chief Executive. So Anish, welcome. I want to go back to Piyush Goyal about, you were saying that 2 trillion will come from exports. You also had the 30 trillion number, which a lot of people then said, "Kya bol rahe hain Piyush ji, 30 trillion abhi kahan pe hum log pahunche?" Given that the government didn't meet the 5 trillion target at the date. Now, of course, the pandemic happened and so many other things happened, which were a black swan kind of event, and that pushed you back, but it didn't happen at the timeline that you said. Is this a former investment person, a former chartered accountant just trying to talk up the India story? Because ultimately, the credibility of what a government or a minister says depends on then the ability to get that target done. One thing is to talk up spirits. The other is to actually make it happen given that timeline. That's question number one. Question number two is on demand. The one question being asked is whether there is enough in the budget to actually spur demand. Your opponents will say that because there is unemployment, people don't have money, it's a K-shaped recovery, therefore there isn't as much consumption demand and the budget doesn't do adequate to spur that. So respond to both of those and then I go across to Anish.
I'll just make one housekeeping correction. You don't become a former chartered accountant. I'm a chartered accountant for the rest of my life, Rahul. So please don't take that away from me. But on a more serious note, first of all, my current exports need to grow at about 9% in merchandise and about 16% in services to achieve the 1 trillion of services and 1 trillion of merchandise exports by 2030. It's a matter of fact, statistical calculation. It's not something out of the top of my head. And it's been shared with all the export promotion councils, with all the large exporters, including Mr. Anish Shah's company, Mahindra Group, which is a large player in the world markets. And by and large, the feedback I get is that as we are delivering on the free trade agreements, as India's own competitive spirits, competitiveness is improving and our animal spirits are getting more and more activated. As India is becoming an easier place to do business, as our startups and technology and innovation is finding center stage in the world, as the world is looking to diversify to, let's say, friendshoring or looking for trusted partners, I think the global stars are actually aligning themselves to support us in our ambitious plans. So first of all, most doable export target, you need not worry. The 30 trillion is also on a business as usual scenario. And by the way, it's one of my calling cards when I go negotiating a free trade agreement. With 1.4 billion people aspiring for a better quality of life, with nuclear families and more women coming into the workforce, the demand for goods and services in India is going to present huge opportunity, both for Indian domestic production and wherever we are not competitive, even for other countries to support us. So I'm very confident, given our historical track record, our own economy over the last 30 years has grown 11.8 times in a situation where it was not easy to do business, where foreign investments were low, India's macroeconomic fundamentals were weak, inflation was in double digit. Despite all that, we are now 11.8 times what we were 30 years ago. So when I talk of a $35 trillion economy from a $3.5 trillion economy now, let's say 25 years down the road, it's absolutely and eminently doable. And let me tell you, it will happen. And I hope to live to see that happen, as I hope you do.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be fantastic if it does. It'll be even more fantastic if you can make it happen in the timelines that you've laid. That would be great for everyone who is a part of this India story.
100%.
Okay, thank you very much.
100% we will make it happen. And under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, I assure you the people of India also believe it will happen.
Okay, we leave it over there. Minister Goyal, thank you very much for joining us. I want to tell our viewers that we have P. Chidambaram, the former finance minister, man who's actually made 9 budgets. So he knows a thing or two about making budgets. He'll be speaking to us in a moment from now. I want to get a word in from Anisha on the expectation now shifting towards India Inc. The government says we have done enough and more. Allocation on capital expenditure for public goods, public infrastructure increased once again in a very big way. The one thing that everyone in government and outside are waiting for is for the India Inc. investment cycle to kick off.